Reacting to the interview with police of Juan Torres, the brother of Jorge Torres, who was suffocated to death in the suitcase of Sarah Boone when she said that they were playing a drunken game of hide and seek. And she called 911, said that she put her boyfriend George into her suitcase, zipped him up in there, went upstairs to bed, and came back 12 hours later and found him dead in her suitcase. And later we learned that she actually took videos of George that night, begging her to let him out of her suitcase, and she refused. And so this is the police interviewing George's brother, Juan. Oh, and one thing I wanted to say before we start this video happened at the beginning of 2020. So at the end of February 2020. And I don't know if all of you remember, but I definitely remember I was so sick at this time also. And it was before they announced the coronavirus, because they announced that I think mid-March of 2020. And so me, like a lot of people, was really sick and didn't know why. And I went to the doctor. They couldn't tell me what was going on. And so I want us to have some compassion for Detective Chelsea in these interviews, because not only was she pregnant and having to deal with Sarah Boone, which is terrible enough, but I believe she also had the coronavirus at this time before she even knew what it was. So that's the reason that she was probably coughing. I don't know for sure, but it was around the same time. And I was coughing my head off at that time too. I was going through bags of cough drops every day. It was not fun. So hopefully we can be a little bit more compassionate with Chelsea, because she definitely deserves it. You know, I'm one of hers and Scott's #1 fan. So I really like their technique and how they were in their interrogation with Sarah, and how they were with their interviews with the other people, you know. So let's listen to her and Detective Scott interview Juan.
Today's date is February 26, 2020. The time now is approximately 13:22 hours. This is in reference to Orange County case number 20-017904. I'm currently located in my unmarked agency vehicle outside of yard in Orlando, Florida. In the car with me is my partner,
Scott Lower.
And in the front seat is, sir, can you state your name for me?
Juan Torres.
And your birthday?
31.
Okay. And you are the brother to Jorge Torres Jr., correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It came to my, your parents had explained to me that you had a conversation with George a few days ago. Do you recall that specific date?
Yes. It was Sunday.
On Sunday. So Sunday, we're looking at the calendar together, the 23rd?
The 23rd.
Okay, so February 23rd, you guys had a conversation. Do you recall what time that conversation took place?
7:30. Oh, it finished at 7:30.
Do you remember what time it started? Do you by any chance still have it in your call log?
Does it do it when... So it had to be 7:30. Because when you call, it clocks it. It doesn't do it at the end, it starts it.
It starts it, and
so
then it tells you how long you talked for.
So it was 7:30 then.
Okay. If you do have it in your call log, I'd love to take a picture of it if you still have it.
It's Monday. Sunday right here.
So it'd be Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
if you click, I'm just gonna...
Yeah.
There we go. Do you mind if I take a photo?
No, it's fine.
Okay. And so it says you received an incoming call at 7:30, and you guys spoke for 4 minutes.
Yes. We was talking. I was playing dominoes with my kids and my wife. And at first I wasn't gonna pick it up. Then I picked up.
Okay.
Because they were always fighting and stuff with alcohol.
You know that Juan is really glad that he picked up that phone call, you know, now in hindsight, because if he hadn't, he would have probably felt guilty. I mean, I know they also try to call his daughters, and we haven't heard from them that I know of. But really, I have a big question for anybody that's watching this video is, we'll get to it, but I want to know if y'all can translate Juan's story about who Sarah hit with her car, because I can't figure it out. I've listened to this so many times, and I try to figure out who she hit with the car, and I'm hoping y'all can help me.
So he started talking to me, he was calm, so I was like, oh, okay. So I put it on speaker. So my kids are there, like, they joke around with him, and he was joking around with them. And we're talking, and then he's talking to me about when we was kids. And then, like, a couple minutes after that, that's when I hear in the back start arguing with him. No, I have to call my brother. I have to talk to him. And he's like, no, I'm talking to my brother. It was her phone, so. And then she starts arguing and telling him that, no, tell him what you've been doing to me. You choked me, this and that. But he was calm. And he was like, okay, I gotta let you go. And then he said, I love you. And I told him I love you. And basically, that was it.
Sarah never wants to miss an opportunity to make herself look like a victim. You know, first she was mad that George was talking to his brother and said, oh no, I need to talk to my brother. You know, you need to get off the phone, get off my phone so I can talk to my brother. And then it's like it hit her. Oh, well, now that he's on the phone, you need to tell him that I'm your victim, that you've been abusing me. You know, she always tries to find the moment to look like the victim or the hero. One of the two. So this is one of her victim times. And I don't believe her.
So she yells in the background, tell him what you've been doing to me.
Yeah.
You've been choking me.
Yeah.
Did you ask him anything about that?
No, because the thing with them, they would fight and they would hit each other. Because there was times he came here and she had hit him with a phone and he had a black eye. So it was like...
Did you witness that?
I didn't get to see it, but he told me himself.
Okay. So you guys know that there's domestic between the two?
Between them. And I told him, get out of there, get out of there. I would tell him, leave. And what's crazy is that he would leave, come here, and she would call and tell him to come back, and she would come and get him. So she had the car, he didn't have a car.
Right.
So...
You said that he sounded calm?
He was calm, relaxed. Like he would... I can tell, because...
Okay, so he said that George would leave Sarah, and then Sarah would come to get George. She would call and say, hey, I want you to come back. And then she would go and pick him up. Now she's claiming battered spouse syndrome. You know, I think if she had truly been a battered spouse, that when he left, she would want him to be gone and want him to stay gone because she would be in fear for her life if he came back. But no, she went to pick him up. She called him and then went to pick him up. I hope they use that as evidence against her.
Brother's been drinking for a long time. We tried to get him help before.
Right.
And I can tell.
Okay, so he said that his brother's been drinking for a long time. I know a lot of people ask, you know, why was George even with Sarah? You know, given that she pretty much tortured him for the last couple years of his life. I think there may be a couple reasons for that. But, you know, I think if I were her boyfriend, I would have to drink to be with her too. I just couldn't imagine dealing with something like that sober.
He was like really drunk and he wasn't that drunk that night.
He wasn't.
So when you're describing him as calm, that's an indication that he hadn't been drinking that much.
That he wasn't that drunk. No.
Okay. When he's been drinking, does he get really excited?
Sometimes he gets excited, and you can tell he like slurs his words, and and I can tell like he gets really emotional, and sometimes starts crying and.
Okay. And none of that happened that night?
No, none of that.
Have you ever witnessed them physically fight?
I've seen them because I've been to their house and she's come out all crazy. I went over with my wife and they had called me to go over there. She had called me to go over there.
Sarah?
Sarah had.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I'll come over. That he wanted to see me. So I went over. And as soon as I get there, she comes out crazy because she saw some guy peeing around the corner, and she was trying to fight the guy and argue with the guy. And my brother was like, yo, calm down, B. Just calm down. And it was like, I went to that. That's why I would try to avoid everything. Like, I would.
Okay, so I'm confused about this part. You know, Detective Chelsea asked Juan, have you ever seen them physically fight? And he said, yeah. Sarah called me to come over. And then he starts describing how Sarah was trying to fight someone else that was urinating in public, I think. Is that the way y'all understand the story? I mean, I'm not hearing him say that he witnessed Sarah and George physically fighting with each other. I might have missed something. I really don't understand. But so far, I haven't heard him say that he's witnessed Sarah and George physically fighting.
Whenever he called me, I talked to him. I tried to talk to him. But it was always, like, they were always...
Did she physically touch George, or was she just getting really upset and
upset, like she came out upset. But there's a person, I can't remember, somebody seen him.
Okay, this is the part I need help with. I've listened to this part so many times, and I can't decide who he's talking about. Who was on a bicycle, or was the person that she hit, were they on a bicycle? Or was George on a bicycle witnessing her run over someone else that's maybe walking or a pedestrian? I don't know. I can't make it out. See if you can help me. Let me rewind it just a little bit. Start at the beginning of the story.
But there's a person, I can't remember, somebody seen him because he was on a bike one day. And he told me, I can't remember the person it was, because he was on a bicycle, and she hit him with the car. And I can't remember who the person was, and he told me.
Okay. Have you any...
Okay, so he said, I really don't know. I have to rewind it again. But the way he keeps saying, he told me, is like George was telling the story to Juan about Sarah hitting someone else with her car. But I can't understand who the person was and if that person was on a bicycle. See, I'm going to rewind it one more time, see if you can help me. Help me understand this, figure it out.
Person, I can't remember, somebody seen him.
Gotta go back a little bit more.
I went to that. That's why I would try to avoid everything. Like, whenever he called me, I talked to him. I tried to talk to him. But it was always, like, they were always...
Did she physically touch George, or was she just getting really upset and
upset, like she came out upset. But there's a person, I can't remember, somebody seen him because he was on a bike one day. And he told me, I can't remember the person it was, because he was on a bicycle, and she hit him with the car. And I can't remember who the person was, and he told me.
So he was on a bicycle and she hit him with a car. It sounds like George was telling Juan that Sarah hit a guy that was on a bicycle with her car. That's the way I'm understanding it. I really wish the detectives would have asked him more questions about that, because there's too many he's in there, and I just can't make it out. I don't know. That's kind of where I ended up with it, is that George was telling Juan that Sarah hit another guy. So she was trying to fight one guy that was doing public urination, which is legal in some countries. I learned the hard way. But yeah, I think that's the story. I'm not sure. I need help.
Okay. Have you ever seen any marks on George?
Yeah, around his neck, eye.
Like what kind of marks?
Like the time she hit him with the phone.
Okay.
He had a black eye, scratches all over his neck.
Would you see Sarah every time you saw George?
So not George, but Juan was saying that he saw George with a black eye and with scratches all over his neck. And that's consistent with what Brian Boone here described also, that Sarah would leave marks, scratches on his neck, and like she would turn violent when she was drunk and would try to choke him, and so he would end up with scratches all over his neck. And the way that he put it, it would seem like it was pretty often.
Off and on. Like, if I would go over there, I would see her with him. And then sometimes if he ever came here, I would see him. Or sometimes when I would go over there, he would just come out and I wouldn't see her.
So you more saw your brother than Sarah?
I think it was equal.
Equal?
Because I've seen her. Sometimes she had marks and stuff. So
and what do you mean by marks?
Like bruises and stuff too.
Okay, so Juan says that he's seen Sarah with marks and bruises on her, but he has never, from what I understood, he's never seen George and Sarah physically fight, but he said that they would beat each other. Well, if he's never seen it, how does he know? Like, I've never seen it either, and I don't know. I mean, of course, he's a lot closer to the situation, but there was one time that I was on vacation in Florida with my son. It was in Destin. It wasn't in Orlando. But we were out at night, and there was this homeless alcoholic man that came up to me, and he started beating himself up right in front of me, and it was really scary. And I was telling my son about it because he wasn't with me at the time. I was telling him about it later, and he said, "Oh, that's common for alcoholics to beat themselves up." I didn't know that, but I'm just wondering, could Sarah have given herself injuries and try to blame it on George? I mean, I think it's a possibility. I just don't believe Sarah. You all know that by now.
They used to beat each other.
And where were her bruises be?
I've seen on her arm, black eyes too.
Okay, so I believe it was Melissa, the property manager, that said George told Melissa that Sarah would hold him hostage in rooms and wouldn't let him out. And he would pick her up by her arms and physically move her out of his way so he could escape the room. And when he would do that, it would leave bruises on her arms. So to me, that's a possible explanation, that it could have been self-defense. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I'm just saying it's possible.
Okay. Did George ever confide in you about their domestic problems? Like, did he ever tell you? Is there anything else that he's ever told you about him and Sarah Any arguments? Any physical altercations?
No, he didn't really like to talk about it like that. Like, everybody knew it.
Right.
Like, they used to come here and fight and stuff.
Okay.
And my mom wouldn't like it and tell them to go.
Right.
And I know one day she came, it's been like maybe like 2 months. My dad, because she always tried to hug everybody. Everybody didn't want to be hugging like that. And she pushed my dad, and my dad fell.
Yeah.
See, I hope that he testifies to this, Juan testifies to this in court, in Sarah's trial, because that looks pretty bad on her. It looks like elder abuse. I mean, I don't believe George's dad was old enough to be elderly, because if George was in his early 40s, his dad would have probably been around 60, in that range, depending on how old he was when George was born. But I think that's too young to be elderly. But still, it just speaks to Sarah's history of violence. You know, so we got Brian Boone saying that she was violent with him. And then Juan has named 3 people so far that she's been violent with. The public urinator man, the man on the bicycle that she hit with her car, and now his dad. She tried to hug him. He didn't want it, so she pushed him down. I mean, that's dangerous. He could have hit his head and died.
So,
would Sarah always be intoxicated when you saw her?
most of the time.
And what about George?
There was times he was not, he had drank, but he wasn't like drunk. Like, he would try to like eat and try to have her eat, because it was always drinking so much. So he was like, we need to eat something. But
Did you, like a couple of years ago, did you and your brother have any kind of a falling out? Did you guys get into an argument, a fist fight, or anything?
no.
Well, before we get into that about George getting assaulted by his brothers, what he just said was that George would try to get Sarah to eat when they were drinking so that they wouldn't get sick. And according to Sarah, she's the one that did everything for George. But, you know, now when we're hearing all these testimonies, it seemed like George was the one that did everything for Sarah. You know, even Sarah said in her police interrogation, you know, sometimes he would go out and buy wine and cigarettes for her, just trying to be nice so she wouldn't have to do it. And now he's trying to get her to eat while she's drinking so she doesn't get sick. You know, other witnesses, the property manager, Melissa, said that George was always the one that was outside playing with Sarah's son, Lucas. And I believe it was the other neighbors also said that they would only see George playing with Lucas outside and never saw Sarah with her own child. So it seems like George was doing a lot for Sarah.
Has he gotten into a physical altercation with any of your brothers?
With Farrell, he did. The one that had the long hair.
The curly hair?
Yeah. With him, but it was just...
How severe of a fight was this, though?
Nah, brothers.
Did he have to...
Anybody go to the hospital?
No, nothing like that.
Anybody have, like, bloodied lips, broken noses, anything like that?
Broken eye?
No. He had with my other brother, too, with Mo. George had went to the hospital.
George went to the hospital.
Yeah, George.
And it was a few years ago, 2 years ago, maybe 2.5.
That happened because she said they was drunk. They was at my Mo's house, at Moses' house. That's the other one.
Moses?
His name is Moses.
Is it last name Torres?
Torres.
Okay.
They had got into it because Sarah had came and said that George had beat her, and then they got into it. But I wasn't there that day. Moses he can tell you about that.
But George did go to the hospital.
George went. George was in the hospital for that.
Now, in hindsight, I bet this should have been a major red flag. You know, Sarah kind of encouraged violence between George and his brother by saying that George beat her. And, you know, George's brother, Mo, beat him so severely that he had to have facial reconstructive surgery. I mean, that's really serious. And, you know, when Sarah was telling the story in her police interrogation, she didn't seem to have any kind of remorse, any kind of sympathy for George, you know, being beaten almost to death by his own brother. And it was her fault. She instigated it. Okay, well, maybe it wasn't completely her fault, because there would be nothing that anyone could say to get me to do that to my siblings, but she had a lot to do with it.
Do you remember what injuries he sustained?
Something in his eye sockets.
The nose, maybe?
I think his nose, too. But something was wrong with his, like...
Orbital?
Yeah, the orbital. Yeah. What?
All right. Is there anything else that you think is important for us to know about your brother or Sarah and their relationship? I'm assuming the 4-minute conversation, he was just kind of like, you guys were just talking at first.
At
like,
first, just talking. I would notice that he was okay. It wasn't a fight.
You said he was joking with your kids, and then you hear Sarah in the background,
and then that's when Sarah came.
And then you let him go, or he let you go.
He said, because he was like, my niece and nephew are there, they can hear you, like. So he was like, all right, bye, and then.
Okay.
How did she sound?
She sounded like crazy, like she always did. Like, she was always like that, crazy. Like, she would just start yelling.
Was she yelling any kind of threats or anything?
No. She was just saying about calling her brother.
Okay, can you raise your right hand for me? Do you promise and swear everything we've talked about has been true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. This ends the recording 13:35 hours.
Okay, so I will link this video in the comment section at the very top, pinned at the top. And so if you want to watch this video without my commentary, you'll be able to. Just click on the link. I had a couple things I wanted to say, maybe a few things about Sarah Boone and her trial. You know, a lot of YouTubers are talking about how Sarah Boone should have not talked to police. Like, you know, different ways of wording it, but basically she should not have talked to police. And I don't agree with that, because like the prosecutor, state's attorney Jay said, we want people to confess, you know, especially when they commit crimes, right? So if nobody confessed and they all lawyered up, I mean, it would probably be a lot more difficult to find out what happened and who's guilty. And so I just agree with him that it makes society safer when people actually confess. And it would be a lot safer if they would have some remorse and some felt like they deserved to be held accountable for their actions. And Sarah hasn't had that. So that's why I say I'm glad that she did not accept the plea deal. Everybody else is saying, well, not everybody, of course, not everybody, but some people are saying that she should have accepted the plea deal. Well, to me, that just endangers society also if she would have accepted the plea deal, because if she would be out in 8 more years, she would still be young enough and strong enough to do this to someone else or worse. So I do agree with offering some people plea deals, you know, if they are truly remorseful and want to accept responsibility and accountability for their actions. Yeah, I think that I would think they probably deserve less time. But Sarah's just not one of those people. She has no, she's just ice cold about George and him dying. It's just like she has no care whatsoever about him or his family, no empathy, no compassion. She's just, I don't know, it just seems like she's an evil person to me. Like, how can you do this to someone and not feel bad about it? And it sure doesn't seem like she's feeling bad in anything. It looks like she's enjoying herself in her trial. You know, the whole time that she's been in jail, she acts like she's some kind of celebrity. And she's in the limelight and she's just loving it. You know, going so far as to ask for special snacks. You know, and I don't think she even wanted the snacks. She's just trying to exert control over people, like always. So, I think that was her attempt to go over the jail's head to their boss, who she thinks is the judge, Judge Koenig, and say, hey, you know, the jail's not providing me with all the snacks that I want. So tell them to provide me with some juice boxes and Pop-Tarts and cookies and candy. And I really think the breath mints were more for her defense team. Because remember her neighbors talking about how she smelled really bad, like she had bad cigarette breath and what's the other thing? Bad body odor. You know, with her jail records, we noticed that she's refusing showers a lot. So I don't believe she's very into personal hygiene. And it was a heck of a day in court today with Sarah Boone. You know, they finally got all the jurors chosen. I mean, it was pretty entertaining watching the jury selection and asking them questions. And their brutal honesty was kind of refreshing for me. I enjoyed it. So let me know what y'all think, and especially about who does Sarah hit with her car? That's probably going to be the title of this video if I can fit it in there. All right, that's the end of the video.